Any trumpet player who has set their mind to buckling down, working hard, and trying to get better at their instrument knows the value of creating a fundamentals routine to improve their skills. After practicing this routine for a couple of weeks or months, it's a guarantee that you're going to be able to see some progress that's going to lead to excitement and more motivation to continue practicing. Unfortunately, consistently practicing a fundamentals routine also has an unfortunate side effect: boredom. Boredom can wreck even the best laid plans, and oftentimes it'll cause people to abandon their very effective routines and miss out on those deeper layers of progress that they could have on their instrument. To help solve this problem, I'd like to share 5 tips with you to help you beat boredom and to stay consistent with your practice. Implementing one or more of these tips into your practice will help make it engaging and interesting, which is going to help you stay consistent, which is going to help you make more and more progress over time. The first tip I have for you to keep your practice interesting and not boring is to vary the tempos of the exercises you practice. I can't tell you how many times over my career I've found myself falling into the trap of just playing the same exercises, the same way, the same tempos, and just kind of getting into a rut with it. And maybe you've experienced this too. I believe it's the #1 reason that routines can get boring, and the fix for this is incredibly simple: just change the tempos. And when I say to change it to different tempos, I don't mean slightly different tempos. I mean way different tempos. If you're playing a flexibility exercise like the one I have on screen here, it can get really easy to just approach this in some middling tempo where it's not too fast and not too slow, and to always play it the same. But with this new strategy, instead of playing it the same, you're gonna find a tempo that's very slow, one that's kind of in the middle, and one that's faster. For example, if you normally play this exercise, let's say around 76 beats per minute, maybe on one day you're gonna play it at 76, and then the next day, maybe you should play it at 58 beats per minute, and then the day after that, maybe 94. Simple changes like this have a very profound effect on your practice because you're not playing exactly the same thing from day to day, so it forces you to focus in more and make sure that you're producing sound the way you want to under these different conditions. A general guideline you can use to implement this into your practice today is to think about different tempo ranges: a slow tempo range, a medium tempo range, and a fast tempo range. Once you've established these tempo ranges, on day 1, just pick a tempo within one of the tempo ranges and play it there. The next day, pick a tempo from a different tempo range and play that one, and then the next day play a tempo from a range that you haven't played yet, and then just keep cycling through like this. If you follow my channel for any length of time, you know that I've gone way overboard with this, and I've got these spreadsheets with all these tempos listed out for exactly what I need to do. For me, this structure is very helpful, but it's not necessary for you to go that far to get the boredom-curing benefits of varying your tempo ranges. When you're working on fundamental exercises in your routine, let's say you're doing an Arbin exercise for articulation development, it's important to understand that the exercises themselves are not all that important. It's far more important how you play the exercises. In this case, it's important how you are playing the Arbin articulation study and how is that helping you develop articulation. So hopefully it makes sense that as long as you are doing something each day for articulation, you're still gonna get that benefit towards being able to develop consistency in your articulation without having to play the same thing every day. However, it is important to note that some amount of consistency is required. So while we don't want to play the same thing every single day, we also can't play different things every day and never repeat it, or we don't get the consistency we need. The simplest way that you can incorporate this tip into your practice today is to choose 4 exercises for articulation, let's say, and then split those 4 exercises into 2 groups of 2. You're gonna perform these exercises in an A day and a B day fashion. So 2 of the exercises on Monday, the other 2 on Tuesday, then back to the first 2 on Wednesday, then the other 2 on Thursday, and so on. This approach is gonna allow you to have the variety in your practice sessions so that it's not quite so boring or monotonous, but also to have the consistency needed to see improvement. Bonus tip, if you combine tip number 1 and tip number 2, you can alter the exercises on any given day so you're not playing the same thing every day, and you can alter the tempos that you're playing them at and create a routine where you're not playing anything the same way 2 days in a row. The third tip I have for you is similar to the first, but it's more of a mindset approach. To break down practicing into 3 very simple terms, you could have 3 different goals for the exercises in your practice session. You could be learning, you could be testing, or you could be resting. When you're learning in practice, it's gonna be characterized by doing things generally slowly with enough repetitions that you can find problems, solve them, and begin to learn a little bit more about how the trumpet works and what works for you. When testing, this work will be characterized by some faster tempos, not necessarily maxing out, but some faster tempos where you can take what you've learned on the days that you were learning, put it into context in a little bit more musical way, a little bit more way with flow, and you can see what's working and what's not so you can get better direction on where you want to spend your time on the learning days. Finally, if you choose to rest for a particular exercise, you're saying this exercise is in a good spot and I'd rather spend my time working on other things in my practice session. Don't worry, if you've practiced the right way on all of these exercises, your brain is still gonna be working on figuring things out even when you're resting. Also, when you decide you're gonna rest on a couple of exercises, it helps cut down on the overall time commitment of your practice sessions, which is always a plus. My advice for being able to incorporate this tip into your practice today would just be to spend 15 minutes before your practice session and figure out, of the things that you want to practice today, which things do you want to spend learning, which things do you want to spend testing, and which things do you think you could rest from. I know, recording yourself sucks and no one really likes to do it, but it is my 4th tip and I promise that it will help make your practice more interesting. Hear me out. One of the things that can make practice very boring is when you don't really have anything specific to focus on. You've learned all the exercises you've been practicing to a pretty good degree, and unless you change them out for other things, you're kind of in this space where I know what I'm doing and I don't really know what else to focus on to get better. When you don't know how to make something better, it's kind of the definition of then just going through the motions. You're just playing through things and it's not interesting to do that. It's boring. So, how does recording yourself help solve this problem? Well, a commitment to recording yourself regularly is a bit of a paradigm shift. Instead of recording yourself listening back and thinking, oh man, I sound so bad, all of these things are horrible, there's so much to improve, and this is just proof I'm never gonna be good enough. You wanna try to shift your paradigm to, I hear things that I can improve upon, and I believe through hard work and creative problem solving, I can overcome these problems and I can get better. With this new paradigm, you meet the mistakes you make that you hear on the recording with a curious mind, and you begin to ask questions. Why is this happening? What can I do to improve it? What have my teachers told me in the past that might be causing this? This mental approach makes practicing so much more interesting because you are an active participant in you improving your playing and not just some sort of passive bystander just waiting for things to happen magically. Through recording yourself, you're gonna learn things about the trumpet and you're gonna learn things about yourself. You're really deepening your understanding of what makes the trumpet work, and understanding that is almost certainly going to lead you to being a better player and a more consistent player over time. So, if you're one of the players that avoids recording at all costs, I encourage you to shift your paradigm and see the opportunity for growth that is in front of you. Here are a couple of tips for incorporating recording into your practice session. First of all, I don't think you have to record everything that you play. You can do that, and it would be valuable to do that. It's just sometimes we're busy, and committing to listening back to an entire practice session, some of us just don't have time to do that. Instead, what I recommend is to record a 30 to a 60 second sort of snippet of the things you're practicing, listen back, and ask yourself, does this sound like what I want to sound like? Am I doing things the way I want to do them? If the answer is yes, go forward with the confidence that you are doing what you want. But if the answer is no, then make your best guess about what could possibly make this better, and then dive back in, record another 30 to a 60-second snippet, listen back. You just repeat this process till you find yourself in a place where you're like, I do like the way that I sound, and I'm gonna keep doing that. As a final encouragement, you're not looking to solve every single problem that you have on the trumpet in one practice session. Focus on fixing 1 to 2 things per exercise, per practice session, and just commit to sort of chipping away. The cumulative effect of this over time will be massive, and you will get where you want to go. I saved this tip for the end because I wanted to challenge a commonly held belief by musicians that throwing more hours at a practice session will yield a better result. For example, if I practice for 1 hour, that's definitely better than practicing for 30 minutes. And if I practice for 2 hours, that's definitely better than 1 hour. And 3 is better than 2, and 5 is better than 4, and so on. I don't believe that this is true. Here's how I think about it. Everybody has a threshold called the minimum effective dose. I'm pretty sure I got this from Tim Ferriss, I think. The minimum effective dose threshold is a line that under which you won't get anything done, or you're not working enough to see the progress you want to see. In other words, the minimum effective dose, reaching that line, is the least amount of work you could do and see the progress you want to see. On the other end of the spectrum is a threshold called the maximum recoverable volume. This I stole from exercise programming. This threshold is the line at which if you go above it, you'll start to see diminishing returns. This is where like injuries can happen, or at the very minimum, you've done so much work, you can't actually recover from it, and you begin to dig into tomorrow's practice session, making that practice session worse because you played too much today. In other words, the maximum recoverable volume is the most amount of work that someone could do before they begin to see diminishing returns, negative effects, things like that. So my recommendation is, instead of practicing and thinking I have to practice a specific amount of time, or even worse, I'll just play until I can't play anymore, I'm definitely guilty of this, I would begin by trying to find your minimum effective dose. How would you do this? Well, I would start by choosing an amount of repetitions that you want to practice, so maybe 1 to 3 depending on the exercise, or just set a time limit for the work that you want to do, maybe like 10 minutes per exercise or 10 minutes per skill group. Do this routine over a couple of weeks and just see, am I making progress? And if you're making progress, you know, this little amount of work is still causing me to get better. Maybe I don't need as much as I think I did. Or the other side of it is you don't feel like you're quite progressing as much, and maybe you need to add a little bit more into your routine, but adding just a little bit more means that you're gradually building into a routine that works for you and is efficient. So that covers the practice less part, but what about the focus more part? I included focusing more because the only way to get more value out of less time practiced is to approach that practice with incredibly deep focus. This kind of focus is hard work. It might hurt your brain, but you want to know exactly what kind of goals you're trying to achieve. Again, recording yourself is going to help you with this, but you want to stay totally focused on the goal and be sure that you're learning what's working, solving problems so that you're getting better, things like that. These 5 tips are things that I include in my practice on a regular basis, and I found them to be so helpful, but they're not everything that I think makes me successful. If you want 4 other habits that I include in my practice sessions, click the video on the screen and check that out. We will see you in the next video.